As I sit down to write, I'm a child of the 80s. And so it's very natural as I write the first sentence in this book to start thinking about who's going to play the main character and who's going to direct. Yeah. And so I'm sitting down to write this thing. December of 2014, I write the first words, and I already started thinking, gosh, who should play this? And not who is this character, but who could play it. And I thought, you know what, there's this guy, Chris Pratt, and I just saw him in Zero Dark 30 playing a SEAL, but I saw his transformation from Andy Dwyer in Parks and Rec, so he's kind of a big, jolly, funny guy, and then I saw him as a SEAL, so I saw this physical transformation, I saw the acting, and I thought, oh, this Chris Pratt guy, he needs this for his career. Like, he needs to do something. He needs to stretch.
This will blow him up.
Exactly.
In between was the MCU.
Yeah, exactly. So then,
So what you're saying is you saw him before Marvel.
I did. I saw him right there. I knew it. That was the only person I ever thought, because I didn't want someone who has done that before, like who's already done action movies, kind of does that sort of thing. I wanted somebody new, somebody different, somebody who is inherently likable, because he's going to do some horrible things in this book. So I want the audience to already like him, and I want him to have this kind of like Magnum in the 80s, like a lot of his banter back and forth with his buddies, Vietnam buddies, and all that stuff. Like, he was likable, but then there are episodes where he could flip that switch, and it's one of the first times in prime time where a protagonist kills an unarmed person, and it's the end of an episode. It's amazing. Kills this guy Ivan. It's awesome.
Visceral.
Yeah, it's really cool. And they had to fight for that ending. It was a groundbreaking ending. So there are a few episodes in there that get serious, so he could flip that switch and get it done. So I thought that's what I need for my character. That's who I want him to be. And Chris Pratt would be perfect. So but I didn't have any connections to Hollywood, and I also thought, who should direct this thing? Oh, Antoine Fuqua. Awesome. Training Day, Tears of the Sun. He'd be great. But I didn't have any connection to Hollywood, no connection to publishing or anything like that. But I thought that's who's going to direct and that's who's going to star in this thing. So keep typing away. Ended up getting it to Simon & Schuster in New York. They love it. Emily Bessler Books. And she tells me then that I needed to get an agent. I didn't know that I needed an agent. So I'm glad I didn't know that, because I would have tried to find an agent first probably, and I might still be looking. So I said, well, how do you find one of those? And she said, well, here, I'll introduce you to 4 of them and kind of pick one, and they'll all want to do it because you already have essentially a deal in place. So I said, okay, and chose one, and she's still my agent today. She's fantastic. But then gets to Simon & Schuster, and I thought, oh, they're going to make it amazing. They're going to make all these changes, and then because it's Emily Bessler Books, who does Vince Flynn, Brad Thor, she's incredible. If she wants aliens to come down from outer space, guess what's going in this thing? Aliens from outer space are going in this thing for sure.
You have a number, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they're going to make it good.
But then James Reese came from this.
Way to call him a sellout, Eli. Jesus Christ.
But then what happened was there were no changes. There was no changes. And so I thought, oh, that's interesting. It was the content changes were along the lines of...
Did it change anything?
More along the lines of, hey, describe this for someone who hasn't been in the military, or that sort of a thing. Yeah, very, very, that's about it.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
because that's one thing that I've always given you credit for in that regard, and on your descriptions, is like, I've read parts of your books where it's like, okay, and then he pulls back the hammer on his custom 45 camera. It's very detailed for gun guys.
It would be very odd for me not to do that. I couldn't just say he picked up a pistol or he grabbed a shotgun or whatever. Like, it's not in me to do that, because those things tell a story.
It's like painfully clear to
me.
Dude
was a Navy SEAL. Dude was a Navy SEAL.
But there's a lot of Navy SEALs who aren't gun guys. I mean, there's like people assume that just because you're a SEAL or you're SF or whatever, or a Ranger or whatever it might be, that gun stuff. And that's not necessarily the case. You might not be. You might not even know anything about the Second Amendment. You might only know what was issued to you. That's that sort of a thing. Yeah. And that's probably more prevalent than the other side of it. So I was interested in all that stuff before I went in the military. I mean, growing up, I was reading Soldier of Fortune, the Gung Ho magazine, which was awesome back in the day. I think it had a short-lived run there. It was a Soldier of Fortune spin-off, but I still have the SEAL issue to this day. So
no big deal. It's gonna be worth something one day.
Like my dad, like, you reminded me a lot of my dad, because he grew up on all the Tom Clancy, the Soldier of Fortune, like stuff like that. It
was a great time to be alive. I'll tell you that. I love the 80s.
How was it when your first book came out, when it actually launched, and then it did pretty fucking good, where you're like, as Brandon was saying, you go from a first time author, which is unheard of, to I forget the award you won.
Like New York Times bestselling thing. That's
the
like
other one.
I don't know if that's the only one I really think about.
I said, man, there's another one listed, but I mean that's the big one.
Yeah,
but
that's
it's
the
like
one.
that's
the one
the
you
small
want.
one.
You want the number. You want the
Kinda
number one
small.
spot. Yeah. That's
How
the
does
one.
it feel to be the second New York Times bestseller on the podcast?
Seriously. Yeah. It was. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do for so long, and I had prepared myself from an early age, not intentionally, but just because as being a reader, I just loved the magic of these pages. So I'm reading guys, Tom Clancy, Nelson DeMille, A.J. Quinnell, J.C. Pollock, Mark Olden, Louis L'Amour. All these guys were my professors in the art of storytelling from, let's say, 1985 onward. So age 6th grade is where, like 5th grade is where you're reading young adult fiction still, but starting to make that transition into the same kind of books like adult fiction that I read and write today. 6th grade, certainly reading all those kind of books. So I just had amazing professors and I didn't have any other distractions. So I had Atari 2600, which you could only play for like 30 minutes tops, you know? So you have that and you can't game all day long. There's no social media. There's no internet. If you're going to watch a TV show, it's on at 8, 9, or 10 o'clock at night, not available on demand, obviously. And if a new movie's coming out, you're going to go and see that maybe twice a month. Maybe a cool movie comes out. You're going to go on a Friday or Saturday when you're that young with your parents, or maybe with some friends on a weekend or something like that. But you're limited.
If you're gay,
limited. You're limited in like what is going to pull you away from reading. So I got to really establish this base essentially. So when I started down this path, I didn't have to start from scratch, is what I'm saying. I didn't have to wake up. I didn't wake up one morning and say, "What should I do when I get out of the SEAL teams?" Oh, writing would be cool. But how do you do that?
Writes a book.
Exactly,
Okay.
Exactly. So it's contrary to popular belief. I mean, I don't know what stage, how far you made it in the pipeline, but third phase, they have a whole like 3 weeks on how to write. In the SEAL teams.
Definitely didn't get there.
No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. They don't.
That's third phase after Hell Week. It's like, okay, right
Here we go. This is how you do it. This is how you market yourself. This is how you. Yeah, this is how you market yourself. This is how you do this. No, they don't have any of that stuff.
Publisher.
Exactly. Here's our connections. No, there's none of that. But I felt like I had been doing the work already to prepare me for what I wanted to do next. So I didn't have to go and think, what should I have been reading for the last 30 years? Let me go back and start. No, I already had done all of that. So I knew exactly what I liked as a reader from the fan perspective, kind of like Quentin Tarantino didn't go to film school, but he is a student of film because he loves film. So so I never really thought about it in terms of like the odds or anything like that. So I just thought, this is what I'm going to do next. And all my bandwidth went into making it the best book it could possibly be. Next one, I was already writing the second book before I even submitted the first book to Simon & Schuster. Flew to Mozambique to go do some on-the-ground research over there because I knew that was going to be a very significant part of this next phase of the journey for my character. But because I knew that John Grisham, he wrote A Time to Kill first, and he couldn't give that book away. Then he writes The Firm, Tom Cruise is in the movie, off it goes, and we have a John Grisham novel every year or two a year ever since. But if he had stopped after that first book, then we wouldn't.
Okay, you release your first book, it's doing really well. What is the conversation like when Amazon reaches out to you?
It happened before the book even came out. So
Jesus Christ.
So my friend calls me out of the blue in November of 2017. The book came out in March of 2018. 2017, I hadn't talked to this guy for 5 years. His name's Jared Shaw, awesome guy. So calls me out of the blue. I know exactly where I am. I'm at Thunder Ranch in Oregon.
Nice. Very nice.
At Delta Range, exactly, doing some training up there. And I get this call from Jared. I hadn't talked to him in 5 years. And he's like, "Hey, man, do you remember me?" And I'm like, "Jared, of course I remember you. How's it going?" And he's like, "Man, I always wanted to thank you for what you did for me in the SEAL teams." And I was like, I couldn't remember what that was. And so he told me. So,
Not a core member.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't remember.
Like, I got you,
I'm like,
bro.
what did I do? And he's like, "Man, when I said I was getting out of the military, you're the only person that sat me down in your office, talked to me about transitioning to the private sector. You introduced me to people in the private sector. Then you followed up with me to see how I was doing. And if you needed anything else, you're the only person that did that. And I always wanted to thank you." And I was like, "Dude, no problem. How's it going?" And he said, "It's going great, but I heard you have a book coming out." And I said, "Yeah, I can send you an early copy. It's called The Galley." And I just found out what a galley was like 2 weeks before. Like, I didn't even know what that was. It's like a paperback of this that you send out to reviewers ahead of time. And I'm like, "I can send you this galley thing if you want to check it out." And he said, "I'd like that, but I'd like to give it to a friend of mine." And I was like, "Who's that?" And he said, "Chris Pratt." I was like, "Oh, that's interesting because very convenient for me because that's why I envisioned playing this role. So
No
I
shit.
sent it to Jared. Jared read it. He gave it to Chris. They met when Chris came down to Buds to do some training for Zero Dark 30. So Jared was an instructor at Buds at the time, SEAL training, and they got to know each other and hit it
became
off.
friends
And became
after
best
that.
friends.
Yeah.
They're best friends. Jared was in Chris's wedding, and Jared, awesome dude. So he gave it to Chris. Chris read it and called the next week and wanted to option it. So he optioned it first out of the gate, and then from there he takes it and takes it to Amazon from there. So it was before.
So Chris was the one who took it to Amazon.
Yep.
Oh,
So
shit. That's
so
rad.
there's a production company, kind of middle production company, MRC, who gets it first. So there's like multiple kind of levels as far as financing and all that stuff.
Right.
But so Chris got it. Got a showrunner, David DiGilio, who's awesome. Antoine wanted it at the same time. So that's the other crazy part of the story is the exact director that I wanted, another buddy, unbeknownst to me, gave him a copy. Antoine Fuqua, yep. Yeah. Gave him a copy as well before it even came out. And so Antoine wanted it at the same time that Chris wanted it. And then those guys are friends from doing Magnificent Seven together. So they just called and said, let's do it together.
You
so,
weld that shit into existence.
it's crazy.
Because that's one show, like, so Terminal List is one show that I automatically go into, like, any sort of like gunplay, military, any sort of fucking TV show or movie I watch, I'm very critical. I'm just like, okay, this is Hollywood's gay idea of how military shit works or how tactics or guns or whatever. That was the one show that by episode 2, I'm like, all right, you got me.
Oh, thank you.
Like I was completely sold
Yeah.
from the very beginning. That was very good.
Well, I appreciate that. That's one thing we wanted. We all agreed. So me, Antoine, Chris, and David DiGilio, the showrunner, what we wanted to do is stay true to that mindset of a modern day warrior. Like that's what we wanted. We wanted somebody who's a former military cop, let's say firefighter, intelligence officer, whatever. Somebody like that who sits down on their couch, cracks a beer, turns this thing on. We wanted them to know that we at least try, that we at least put in the effort to try to get it right. And there's going to be Hollywood hot sauce to move the story along and that sort of a thing. But we wanted them to realize, okay, they at least put in the effort to do this. And so that was very important to us, and still is on the one that we're filming right now.